Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Scott Cook, CEO at the Longmont Chamber, and welcome to Advancing Excellence with Superintendent Don Haddad as he examines St. Vrain Valley School District growth and student achievement. I'm pleased to be your co-host this afternoon, along with Ricardo Cabrera with the Latino Chamber. Today's event is being presented in both English and Spanish, and Ricardo will now review instructions for translation. Ricardo. Ricardo, I believe you're muted.
All right, thank you everybody and welcome. Yes, my name is Ricardo Cabrera, and bear with me, I'm going to give some instructions in Spanish as this presentation is giving in both languages simultaneously. Bienvenidos a todos y buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Ricardo Cabrera de la Cámara Latina y estamos haciendo esta presentación en inglés y en español simultáneamente. Así es que si prefieren escuchar esta presentación en español, busquen aquí abajo en la sección de interpretación y escojan por favor su canal en el lenguaje que prefieren. También en la parte de abajo aquí van a ver la sección de preguntas y respuestas. Y aquí pueden mandar sus preguntas conforme las tengan. Va a haber una sección y un momento al final de la presentación en la que vamos a leer estas preguntas. Igualmente, esta presentación y las diapositivas están en español y van a ver la liga en el chat para que puedan seguir nuestra presentación de esa manera. Okay, thank you everybody. We do have the presentation in English and in Spanish simultaneously, and you can pick your language of choice down here in the interpretation button. You will also notice the question and answer button where you can send all the questions that you would like to ask. We will have a moment at the end of the presentation where questions will be read and answered. And there is a link in the chat where you can follow this presentation in Spanish if that is what you choose to do. So thank you again, welcome, and back to you, Scott.
Thanks, Ricardo. The Longmont Chamber is committed to business success for our members and the prosperity for all Longmont residents. Working with our education partners, such as the St. Vrain Valley School District, is vital for us as we ensure business success and prosperity for future generations. We also value our relationship with the Latino Chamber and appreciate their commitment to education. Ricardo?
Thank you, Scott. Just one more reminder, amigos, un recordatorio más que tenemos esta presentación en español, si escogen su lenguaje favorito en la parte de interpretación abajo. So thank you, Scott. At the Latino Chamber of Commerce, we are promoting economic advancement, growth, and sustainability for its members by enabling access to business opportunities and developmental resources through strategic alliances, including the Longmont Chamber. Thank you for that. At the Latino Chamber, we are connecting cultures and communities through business by providing business development services, networking opportunities, and advocacy for Boulder County businesses. Thank you for all the support in the local chamber, St. Vrain Valley School District, and Scott Cook from the Longmont Chamber. So back to you, Scott.
All right, thanks, Ricardo. St. Vrain Valley Schools has become a national model for excellence in public education under the leadership of Superintendent Don Haddad. He has received numerous recognitions throughout his 36 years of education, including the Colorado Communicator of the Year, Superintendent of the Year. He was also selected as one of 100 superintendents to participate in the Future Ready Summit at the White House in 2014. As superintendent in St. Vrain for the past 13 years, Don and his team have successfully implemented an award-winning learning technology plan, the development of over 70 instructional focus programs, the implementation of the state's first P-Tech or Pathways to Technology school, and the opening of a 50,000 square foot innovation center. St. Vrain Valley School District is providing students the skills necessary for advancement in a complex and highly competitive globalized world. We're pleased to have Don here today. Thank you, Don, for joining us.
All right. Thanks a lot, Scott. I really appreciate it. Thank you for the kind introduction. And thanks to our community members who are taking the time to listen to a little bit of information and maybe ask some questions and talk a little bit about our schools. I'm very proud of the St. Vrain Valley Schools and our entire community. You know, the school district has grown a lot. This is my 36th year in education, but my 20th year in St. Vrain. And it's amazing where the time goes. But, you know, right now we have about 33,000 students. We are the 7th largest school district in Colorado. We have approximately 411 square miles that we span out over. And we have 60 schools once we open the newest school, which will be opening in Erie. It's Highland Elementary School. And then we also have things like an innovation center and career development centers and things like that. So we're growing and we're going to continue to grow. We saw a little bit of a flattening of the growth with the pandemic, but we're starting to see a lot more activity in terms of students coming back and housing developments and things along those lines. I heard Ricardo introduce the chamber in a way that the Latino chamber in a way that really resonates with me. And it's one of the things that we have in common as a school system. You know, there's a lot of talk around, we educate our children, we have great activities, we do this on a daily basis to work with our students, but oftentimes we don't see a school system as a business also. And we're the largest employer in the area. We have approximately 5,500 employees. And when you look at our entire system, including our general fund budgets, our activity accounts, and our buildings, our assets, you know, we're in that ballpark of about $6 billion worth of funding and other assets. So we are a business, but we're a people business. And our students and our families, they're our most important and valued resource. There's a quote that we kind of live by in the St. Vrain Valley Schools. It comes from Mark Twain, and he says, out of the public schools grows the greatness of a nation. And I really believe that. I have come to understand that a public school system, a high quality public school system, is critically important. Back to when Ricardo was mentioning the economic development. You just can't have a strong economy in a community where you don't have a strong school system. The two go hand in hand. The other thing that we know is public safety and national security is directly tied to the public school system, because we have 90% of all of the students or all of the children in America, 90% of them in grades K through 12 attend a public school. So you can see our current leaders and our future leaders in the next generation, they're all being cultivated through our public school system. When we talk about the value of our homes, the value of our commercial properties, our businesses, they increase and or decrease based on the quality of the schools. Whenever a family is looking to move into a community, the two things that they're most interested in is how safe is the community and what kind of public schools do they have in the community. We also know that the service that we receive from everyone, everywhere we go, whether it's to the gas station or to the bank or to the grocery store, to the movie theater, to the hospitals, you name it. Wherever you go, it is highly likely that you will receive your service from a public school graduate. That's how critically important the work is that we do. And we're a very diverse community, and we're proud of that. We see our diversity as our greatest strength. So I'm going to share with you some information, a little bit about our school district, and show you the pathway that we've been on for a while. And I'll share with you some of the things that are foundational and some of the things that we think of in terms of innovation and how well our students are doing. We talk about this in kind of two layers. You know, most school districts talk about their goal being to have a high graduation rate, or graduate everyone for that matter. In St. Vrain, we see it a little differently. We see graduating as the bare minimum of what you should be able to do. What we're looking at is making sure that every one of our children graduate with a strong competitive advantage, because they're going into a world much different than the world that I grew up in, and probably some of you. The world they're entering into is globalized, it's competitive, it's narrow in terms of your ability to communicate. Communicating with people from other countries is as simple as it was to communicate with your next door neighbor in the past. In fact, it may even be easier to communicate with a person in a completely different country than it was when we were growing up to run down the street to find our best friend. That's how the world has changed, and it's going to continue to change, because if you look at Moore's law, the power and the speed of microchips, it's doubling every 24 months. If you can even wrap your arms around that, if you can wrap your head around the fact that the information flow, the power and the speed of microchips doubling every 24 months. Now think of it in these terms. We used to have a system in education where we refreshed our textbooks every 7 years. Well, now you can't do that. I mean, in 7 months, the information can be outdated. We also start our system, and our system is a pre-K, preschool, all the way up through 14. It's one of those things when you hear 13 and 14, you're like, well, what does that mean? I thought it was K through 12. Well, 13 and 14 is our P-Tech program, which is Pathways Through Technology. And it's a 2-year associate degree program where I'll share a little bit with you about that in a little while, but it's basically a 2-year associate degree program in partnership with our local community college and then some major corporations. And our students can access and earn this 2-year associate degree at no cost to the student. And we have 3 P-Tech programs now, and I'll share a little bit more about that with you. So when you hear pre-K through 14, that's what I'm referring to. For us, it starts in preschool and full day kindergarten. And we have right now a high quality preschool program in every one of our 26 elementary schools, which is really very, very rare. It's very unique to a school district, especially a large one such as St. Vrain, because we want to make sure that every one of our children gets a strong start. And we're seeing, by the time our kids start preschool and by the time they get out, we're seeing really significant gains in their literacy and their math and their cognitive growth and their social and emotional growth. We're also seeing in our 26 elementary schools full day kindergarten. Now, to give you some context, Governor Polis last year created some funding mechanisms for full day kindergarten across the state. St. Vrain has been funding full day kindergarten in all of our 26 schools for over a decade, because we know that early childhood experience, high quality preschool, coupled with full day kindergarten, it's that 1-2 punch that gets a student ready to go. And at the earliest ages, we're introducing STEM thinking to our preschoolers and design thinking, which is different than sitting in a classroom and getting a lecture. It's about empathizing problems. It's about ideating solutions and then prototyping and then testing and revising. And it's the process of problem solving and critical thinking and analyzing things and working together in teams and communicating. And all of these things are happening beginning at 3 years old in our school district. And we've also implemented some really strong foundational programs for reading and for math that are in alignment with state standards. So as early as preschool, our kids are getting that head start. And it doesn't mean that we're not also spending a lot of time playing on the playground and having fun with their friends and all of those things. So it's a combination of both. If you look at our reading achievement, you'll see 5th grade, we test our reading in the 3rd grade and then also in the 5th grade. But you'll see that our CMAS reading continues to increase for all students and outpace the state. And we're interested in making sure that each and every one of our students, our 2 primary groups of students are our white students and our Latino students, our Hispanic students. We have a small population of African-American students and a small population of Asian students. And in terms of what you're going to see here on the charts, we focus primarily on our white students and our Hispanic students, just because of the numbers and the percentages can swing. But our Black students are doing very, very well, as are our Asian students, and their achievement levels have been steadily at a high level. And so you'll see they're very, very comparable in some of these charts. our Hispanic students increased by about 11% in their reading proficiency over the past 5 years. And that's pretty significant because it's hard to improve when you have such a large number of students. To increase the percent is really difficult. If you have a small cohort, you can see some pretty significant gains quickly, but 11% is pretty good. Some of the achievement strategies, obviously the development of literacy all the way from preschool all the way up through the 3rd grade and beyond, the implementation of some programs. We've also provided Mayan Reading, which is a virtual reading program in English and Spanish for all of our elementary schools where they can work on reading from home with their parents. We also are using a program called Project Launch in grades K through 5, where our students are in school throughout the month of June, which is unusual for most school districts. It's 4 days a week and it focuses on literacy and on math. And so those are the kinds of things you'll see that we're doing. We're also, with our mobile lab, we're reaching out to our communities and promoting the process of reading. It's a mobile lab that was funded completely by our corporate partners, and it's high tech, and we take it out, and it's one of those things where we can do a lot of reading programs and projects out in the community. Same thing with math. We're seeing nice gains with our students across the board. Our Hispanic students increased in the percentage of students meeting or exceeding expectations by 10%. And so they're continuing to work in a positive trajectory. And we're going to keep moving forward until we can get each and every one of our 33,000 students. Obviously, some of those are in the high school and middle schools, but all of them achieving at that highest level. Algebra One is something that we believe is important. It's a gateway into high school. Now, traditionally, people don't take, our students normally wouldn't take Algebra One until they get to the 9th grade. But we have a lot of students that are taking Algebra One in the 8th grade. We have a number of students that are actually taking geometry in the 8th grade, which is not usually taken until the 10th grade. And we have seen a nice increase in the number of our Hispanic and Black students who have not only been enrolling in algebra and geometry, but we've had a 100% pass rate in Algebra One in the 8th grade with both our Hispanic and our Black students. And so we're very, very excited about that. And we have summer academic programming that supports Algebra One as they transition into the 9th grade. It's a program that will start 2 weeks before the rest of the students start, and they get that jump on these important subject areas. Some of the things that we're doing in terms of strategies: providing advanced coursework as early on in the 5th and 7th grades. We have been recruiting underrepresented students for advanced courses, and right now, St. Vrain, and I'll share this with you a little bit later, but there are about 14,000 school districts in the United States. And St. Vrain was recognized recently by the College Board for being one of the top school districts in the country for underrepresented students participating in advanced coursework, advanced placement, international baccalaureate, college level courses, things along those lines. And then again, we have the additional math support that I talked to you about, consistent with the literacy support. This part around student engagement is really, really important. It's one of the most underestimated impacts on students. We started to think that if we could get every one of our children, and this is something I talked with Mike Butler about years ago when I started in St. Vrain, if we could get every single one of our children engaged in a co-curricular, whether it's music, athletics, debate, drama, all of these programs, that connection and the skills that they learn in leadership and communication and teamwork, and they develop a sense of pride, we felt if we could do that, we could meet that 100% graduation rate at some point. And you'll see here that our student engagement has increased by 25% over the last 4 years. So we were down slightly over 50%, 56%. We're up at 81%. That means 81% of our students now are engaged in these really important. And that's not just happening by chance. And again, it's represented against all age groups. And we're really going to keep pushing on that till we get to as high as we can get. We understand some students are working after school. Some students have other commitments and responsibilities, but we're trying to get everybody into this group. This here is something I remember back, I guess it would have been 2004, when I first became the executive director of secondary schools, middle schools and high schools for St. Vrain. I had just left Niwot High School as the principal. And one of the things that I looked at, and this is when we had about 10,000 fewer students than we have today, and many schools fewer than we have today. But I remember looking at the data back then, and it showed that we were averaging about 80 to 90 expulsions, not suspensions, expulsions, 80 to 90 a year. And the majority of students who were being expelled were Hispanic students. And it struck me as one of the things that we had to get a handle on quickly. And so we set out to do that. And there are a lot of strategies, from renovating our buildings to implementing high quality programs, to changing the ways in which we hire teachers and staff, to the ways in which we engage with our students. And you can see that that work started to make progress in that 2009, 2010, right after. That's about the first year, 2008-9, when I became the superintendent. And we had more students than we did in 2005, but we had brought the numbers down to 39, and then you see 27, 40, 34, 30, 60, and then you can see the last few years, 8, 5, 5, and in the last 2 years, we've had 0. Now, if you look at school districts our size across the state, you will see that number well over 100 in just about every school district. And this is not because we have lowered our standards. This is because we have increased our things like getting students engaged in the co-curricular arenas, like putting programs such as P-TECH in place, like renovating the schools to create these high quality, amazing facilities that kids can have pride in, like engaging them in interactive learning with technology, and like recognizing that children, like adults, make mistakes. And it's not necessary to discipline them in a way that puts them at a disadvantage. It's important to coach them and to teach them and to help them. Now, there are some times when the behavior might be a required expulsion, but most times we have discretion, and our teachers and staff are doing great work, and our students and parents are as well. Some of the things I've already mentioned here, you know, when you start kids out in preschool and full day kindergarten and they get a great start, and then you have outreach programs in the critical transitions in the going into the 6th grade from the 5th grade and 8th grade going into the 9th grade, having district attendance liaisons, all of these things that you see really begin to connect our students to something. You know, I remember asking some of our students who were expelled years ago, and I asked some of our students who dropped out years ago, why would you do that? I mean, tell me a little bit about, and almost to a T, they would say things to me like, what's the point? After high school, I'm just going to get a job anyways. Why not just do it now? Because they had financial barriers, they had system barriers. When you have a program such as P-TECH, a 2-year associate degree program that you can achieve at no cost to yourself, and you can enter into the workforce making $60,000 to $70,000 a year right out of that program and not have huge college debt. When you can go to a 4-year program, when you can go into the military, when you can go into any one of these career opportunities that we have in areas like welding and electronics and optics and computer information systems, and all of these things, machining, you've got so many opportunities in St. Vrain that you have hope and you have something to look towards. And so it's keeping our children in school and it's keeping them connected. And so we're seeing a lot of these things work. Now, I talked to you a little bit about the advanced coursework. And again, what I'm talking about is advanced placement classes, which are similar to college level courses. You can earn college level credit if you get a 3 or higher on the exam. The International Baccalaureate program, concurrent enrollment, we have partnerships with all of our community colleges and our 4-year colleges and universities. And this is what I was talking about in terms of closing the gap. The St. Vrain Valley Schools was one of 4 Colorado school districts out of the 178, and one of 373 nationwide out of 14,000 to make the College Board, which is the most prestigious education institution in the country, annual Advanced Placement District Honor Roll. And the Advanced Placement Honor Roll recognizes school districts committed to increasing access to their advanced courses for all students. And so we not only saw a lot more students. We saw a lot more of our Hispanic students, a lot more of our Black students, and a lot more of our white students, but all groups moving forward, and not only more students engaged in the classes, but more students earning a 3 or higher on a scale of 1 to 5, which is worth college credit. This is the advanced placement exam count, and you can see in 2020, we've almost doubled the amount of exams that we are administering from 2016. When I started back in 2004 and 5 as the executive director of secondary schools, we were administering about 300 a year. And you can see not only more students, but you can see that it's gone from 55% of our students earning college credit to 62% of the kids who are taking the classes earning college credit. Same thing here, and I'll bring you down to these 3 areas. We've had a 92% increase of Hispanic students taking advanced placement exams in 5 years, while also increasing the percentage of students scoring 3 or higher. We've had a 52% increase of white students taking the advanced placement exams. And then we've had a 50% increase of our Black students taking AP exams in 5 years while increasing. And so you see this, and the significance of it is that a lot of our students are graduating from high school with a full year of college credit under their belt. And when they go to college, they go as a sophomore as opposed to a freshman. And so there's a lot of cost savings there as well for parents. International Baccalaureate, you see the same thing. It's on a scale of 1 to 7. And the St. Vrain Valley School District International Baccalaureate program has seen a 46% increase in the number of International Baccalaureate diploma candidates in 3 years, and a 39% increase in the number of students that passed the diploma from 2019. If you pass and earn an IB diploma, you get automatic admission into any college or university into Colorado, except for, it used to be the Colorado School of Mines. I'm not sure where they are right now. But it's that well thought of. And when you do go to college, you go as a sophomore as opposed to a freshman, because the credits you've earned during this program are the equivalent of your freshman year in college. Concurrent enrollment is a whole host of other types of college level courses that our students are taking in partnership with Front Range Community College, Ames Community College, the University of Colorado, the University of Colorado at Denver, Colorado State University, Northern Colorado, and some online college programs. And we've seen a 201% increase in the number of concurrent enrollment courses taken in 7 years. That's similar to saying a 201% increase in the number of college level courses taken by our students. And you can see how we used to be down at 473, and now you can see we're up at 1,825. And again, some of the things that we're doing is advancing the options that are out there for our students. We're focusing our master schedules that allows for an 8-period day. With all of the budget cuts in Colorado and across the United States in public education, a lot of school districts don't allow students to take 8 classes because it costs too much for the district. We have students that can take 8 periods a day, and that is very unique. And so there's a lot of room in their schedule to get those classes. We also have, again, the P-TECH programs, an advanced manufacturing program right now where we have 25 plus advanced manufacturing companies that partner with our students that help get them internships and mentoring opportunities and certifications in things like artificial intelligence, computer science, advanced STEM skills, all of those things around electronics and optics and machining and welding and things that I talked to you about. And again, a certification, a 2-year certification, gets you a job making $50,000 to $70,000 a year right out of high school with those programs. So they're very important. And when I say right out of high school, right after you earn your certification. We also have a seal of biliteracy, where it's really important to us that we want all of our kids to be proficient in more than one language. And so we're pushing that really hard with our kids, because we live in a globalized world. It's not going to help a student to only be proficient in one language. And so it's important for us that we continue to not only promote that, but to recognize it and reward it. National Merit Scholarship Qualifying Test. This is something that it's the PSAT, and then the next year they'll take the SAT. But St. Vrain Valley Schools had 69% of all of our 11th graders meet this English reading and writing benchmark scores. And that's really hard to do. It sounds like, well, gosh, why aren't you higher than 69%? But that is a really, really high standard because it's a college admissions test. And that number continues to grow. So we're excited about that, both in those areas and then in math as well. The PSAT, all of our 10th graders will take that, and our 9th graders, and then the 11th graders in Colorado, everyone will take the SAT. And again, we've continued to see the majority of St. Vrain students meet all of the readiness benchmarks on all 3 of our tests, and you can see the trajectory upward, and it continues to move in the right direction. So we're very excited about this work. It's the test that kids take to gain admission into a college or a university. Now, things are changing, and many of the colleges and universities across the country are saying that they don't necessarily need to see these test scores. They're looking at other things like grade point averages and leadership activities that you're engaged in, co-curricular things, citizenship, all of these things. But right now, these are the 2 primary. It used to be the ACT for us, but then Colorado moved to the SAT. And again, a lot of strategies. Our kids come in on Saturdays. They come in the evenings for study sessions. The advanced course offerings at an earlier age better prepares them. Professional development for our teachers. There's a lot of things that we're doing by design to achieve these results. Graduation rates, it's the end game for high school. But for us, again, we said, we want it to be the bare minimum of what our kids achieve. We want them to graduate with enough credits, but we also want them to graduate with a strong competitive advantage so they can compete with anybody anywhere in the world. St. Vrain requires among the highest graduation requirements in the state and country. And I'll give you an example, and it's not to be competitive or anything like that with a neighboring school district, but in Boulder Valley, you need 22 credits to graduate. In St. Vrain, you need 24.5 credits to graduate. So it's much harder to graduate from St. Vrain than it is from Boulder Valley and most districts in Colorado, if not all, and across the country as well. And to show you, what that might look like, just one area, for example, in math, we require 3 years of math, all at Algebra One or higher. Many districts require only 2 years of math, and they'll accept pre-algebra. And so we've challenged our students to work harder, to take more rigor in their schedules, and you can see the trajectory of our graduation rate. Now, if you look back in 2010, you will see that our Hispanic students were graduating at a rate of 55.9%. Now, that's when we only required 23.5 credits, because we've since increased to 24.5, which is what I just explained. Now, a 4-year graduation rate is for our Hispanic students is all the way up to 86.3, and you can see it's been climbing every year. The thing that's important to remember about this is a 4-year graduation rate. If you look at 4.5 years and 5 years and 5.5 years, you're going to see our dropout rate in just a second. Our dropout rate is under 1%. It's at a 0.8, which means 99.2% of our students will finish, whether it's in 4 years or 4.5 years, but this represents the 4 years, which is what the state tracks. And then you can see for all of our students, we have surpassed 90% for the first time in the history of the St. Vrain Valley School District. And that's while we have increased the requirements. Same thing here with dropouts. You can see back in 2009 and 10, our Hispanic students were dropping out at about 4.8, close to 5%. And now you come all the way down to 1.5, and our total student body is dropping out at 0.8. So again, 99.2% of our students are not dropping out. That all comes back to preschool, full day kindergarten, our facilities, our teachers, our co-curricular activities, all of the things that we're doing to keep kids engaged so that we can not only graduate them, but graduate them with a strong competitive advantage. And we've gone over some of these things, so I won't repeat them. There is something new on this screen. For example, robotics. We have over 150 robotics teams across our 60 schools, all the way from elementary school up to the 12th grade. And our kids are engaged on Saturdays, in the evenings, in competitive experiences and practices and those kinds of things. We've also expanded e-credit, which means a student who gets behind in a class can catch up quickly with technology, with e-recovery. And that way they don't dig themselves a hole to where it's really hard to get out and they get discouraged. So that's a way that we keep them on track for graduation. Not going to repeat much there. You can take a look at that slide, but some of these things are the same things that we've been talking about. St. Vrain has over 70, and now that this is actually outdated, we have actually over 90 now high quality, rigorous instructional programs with 3 P-Tech and a whole host of others, such as a focus program would be like our STEM program at Skyline High School, our Energy Academy at Meade High School, our Aerospace Academy at Erie High School, our Medical and Biosciences Academy at Longmont High School, our Leadership Academy at Silver Creek High School, and our Medical and Biosciences program at Frederick High School. And all of these things, the International Baccalaureate program at Niwot. And we have these all the way K through 12, so that with choice, you can go to any one of our schools that you have an interest in, and you'll get the standard education. So it's not like you have to take these programs. You can go to any school and get the standard education, but you can get this on top of. And that's what oftentimes is what we're talking about when we say that strong competitive advantage. And we have a lot of corporate partners and business partners that provide mentoring and internships and job shadowing for our students, helping them to earn certifications. And here's a list of some of them, certainly not all of them, but STEM and medical and biosciences, P-Tech, engineering and aerospace, high school of business, robotics, virtual reality, artificial intelligence, and you can just go down the list and look at those. And again, that's not all inclusive, but it gives you an idea of what I'm talking about. So I think this is the last slide, and it really captures what we're talking about with the strong competitive advantage. Now, 7 out of 8 of our St. Vrain feeder high schools earned at least one Becher Scholarship finalist in the class of 21. And you'll see that there's 14 there. And there's only 40 of those that are awarded throughout 178 school districts in Colorado, and 14 of them came from St. Vrain. That's what we're talking about. When you look at a 90% plus graduation rate, that's what we're talking about. When you look at our graduation rate for all of our students, our dropout rate, all of these things moving in the right direction, that's what we're talking about when we say a strong competitive advantage. And it means for each and every one of our 33,000 children. You know, the thing that I worry about and the thing that I think about all the time is how do we get that 9.7% onto that 90.3 so that we get every single one of our children out the door in 4 years. And that's what we're continuing to work towards in St. Vrain. So I'm going to stop there and see if there are any questions that people would like to visit about.
All right, thank you, Don. That was a lot of good information, very helpful information. And we do have a few questions. So I'm going to turn it over to Ricardo. I think is going to read off the first question, and then we'll just kind of take turns from there.
Well, thank you, Scott. And thank you, Don. That was pretty impressive. I knew you guys were good, but you guys are really good.
Thanks.
Let me start with the first question here that comes from Rachel Garcia, and she asks, what is being done in the district to address equity issues affecting the Latino community and other communities of color? Maybe you can rehash that for us quickly.
Yeah, I mean, things like offering preschool to every single child, high quality, whether you can afford it or not. And regardless of your opportunity, we want at home, we want to make sure that you have that opportunity. Same thing with full day kindergarten. Same thing with our technology. You know, we are one of the few districts that provide that iPad technology for every single child without cost. When you look at the quality of the facilities, we've renovated all of our buildings so that it doesn't matter which school you go to, you're going to go to a high quality program. Same thing with all of the highest level coursework opportunities in every school. And you know, you might hear me say these things and say, well, yeah, that's the way it should be. That's not the way it is. That's not the way it is in most school districts, and it certainly is not the way that it used to be in St. Vrain. And getting kids engaged in the athletic programs and the music programs and the art programs, and making sure that the way in which students are being disciplined and behavioral management is not disproportionate, and reaching out to parents and engaging parents in these activities and providing focused school opportunities for kids to engage across the board. It's when we talk about equity, we mean it. Every child. And if somebody comes to me and says, wait a minute, you are disproportionately disciplining students of color, we're going to stop and we're going to have that conversation, because we're not going to do that. And if we are, we're going to stop doing it. And that's the way we talk about everything. Equity for us means equity. And it doesn't mean that everybody gets exactly the same thing. What it means is everybody gets what they need. And in some cases, that means certain schools where there are lower socioeconomic situations, we put more money into those schools than other schools. So it's not everybody gets the exact same amount. It's everybody gets exactly what they need and more to be able to be successful.
Thank you, Don.
Yeah.
Scott, do you have a question?
I do. Don, this is a little bit of a long one, but he's got some numbers in here. So thank you for your expressed dedication to equity. As you may know, one of the Latino Chamber of Commerce purposes is to promote fairness and equity for Latino-owned businesses. Local governments, including school districts, spend millions of dollars hiring contractors for goods and services. And despite decades of affirmative action and other policies meant to make up for disparities, most of those contracts go to white-owned businesses. Minority enrollment in the St. Vrain Valley School District is about 37%, with the majority of those Latinos. St. Vrain's budget is $480 million annually. $24.9 million is budgeted for purchase services, and $29.3 million is budgeted for supplies and materials. Can you tell us how much of this $54.2 million are used to purchase goods, services, or contracts with Latino-owned businesses? Does St. Vrain have any goals or policies for diversity and inclusivity in its purchasing process? If yes, can you provide? If not, why not?
Yeah, I'll tell you, when I started in this role, I knew that there were 3 or 4, contractors with some of the major contracts, and most of them were local. And one of the things that I heard repeatedly is, you've got to manage the money that you have well. Because back in the day, you remember St. Vrain went through some pretty hard times with funding based on some financial errors. And so the policy that we established is we're going to go after the best product at the best cost so that we can provide the best facility, the best product, the best whatever it is for our children. So we haven't looked at it to say we're going to purchase from certain businesses owned by minority folks. What we have looked at is to say we're going to make sure that we don't exclude anybody. So that's how we look at equity. We're going to look at every single business, every single vendor, every single corporation, and then we go through a process, a bidding process, and we look at the quality of their product and the cost. And those two together have to be the very best option for our students. That's how we make our decisions around what we're going to purchase and from whom we're going to purchase. Best quality, best cost. It doesn't matter if you are a minority business owned or other. We're looking at the quality of the product at the cost, because if we look at anything else, if we start making decisions around purchasing for something other than quality of product or something other than quality of cost, then we're not managing the taxpayer dollars the way in which we've been entrusted to manage them. And our end game is to make sure that our children, all 33,000 of them, are getting the very best educational experience they can get. That's what our goal is, and that's what our objective. And the only way we can do that is if we go after the best cost and the best product. And usually it's the best product will take precedence over the cost. We don't mind paying a little bit more if it's going to get that quality of product up. But that's very different than in years past where they had a few vendors that they went to all the time. And some people have criticized us to say, well, you should only purchase locally. But if you limit your purchases to only local, then you step outside of those two areas around quality of product and quality of cost. And then you start spending money that you don't need to spend. And then you have to go back out to the community and say, we need another mill levy override because we weren't doing our due diligence in terms of making sure that we went after the best product at the best cost. So, thanks.
Thank you, Don. We have a question from Yaira Okendo Figueroa, and she asks, any differences in achievement when you factor in socioeconomic status and race?
Yeah, actually, great question. The primary driving force around student achievement is socioeconomics. That's the tightest correlation. When you look at, there are certain things that can create challenges around a language barrier, but we're able to work through that relatively quickly. The biggest challenge is socioeconomics. And that's why we've tried to mitigate and address some of those things, because traditionally, and not just in St. Vrain, but traditionally in school districts across America, lower socioeconomic communities usually have less access to things like preschool and full day kindergarten and technology and advanced placement courses and all of these things that we know are important for a kid's education. So it is the toughest obstacle is socioeconomics, and that's where we've tried to support and supplement our families to make sure that they are not being denied access to these opportunities because of a financial barrier. Case in point, offering a 2-year associate degree to a student and their families who otherwise couldn't afford that is huge, because they can get their college degree at no cost to the student and go out and make $60,000, $70,000 a year right afterwards. They wouldn't be able to do that if they had socioeconomic barriers. And so all the way through our system, that's what we've tried to do, is remove those barriers, because every one of our kids is really smart. You guys, I hear people say things like, well, when I was in school, let me tell you, the kids today, all 33,000 of our kids are way beyond where we were as a group when I was going to school. The thing that's different is some kids have access and opportunity and some kids don't across America. And what we've tried to do in our system is make sure that every child has access and every child has opportunity, and not just to the bare minimum, that every child has access and opportunity to that high quality experience. And so that's kind of where we're at. And that, to your question, I hope that answers it around socioeconomics and
All right, and our next one is from Laura. She asks, for those who do equity work in education, we know that massive test assessment perpetuates more inequities and racial injustice. What is the St. Vrain Valley School District doing as an institution to advocate to find other ways to assess students' learning? What does the St. Vrain Valley School District assess as learning beyond math and reading?
Well, what I just shared with you are all the things that we look at to kind of see how well we're doing and assess the quality of our students' experience. You know, the timing of this question is perfect, because I will tell you, I am a strong opponent of standardized testing the way in which Colorado and the rest of the country does it. I think it sets kids up for failure. It sets kids up to be labeled, and they've called it, when kids don't do well on a test, they call it an achievement gap. But if you think about it, the only way that could be true is if you think of testing as the only way in which you can achieve something. There are lots of talents and skills that children across the board have that have nothing to do with a test. But when you test them, and that's all you look at, and then you label them, that's damaging. And then you label subgroups as being responsible for the achievement gap. Our board and I wrote a letter to the state this year asking them to suspend state testing. We are also in the process of advancing legislation to restructure and revise and redefine and redesign our entire accreditation system to move away from this system that I have referred to as you test someone, you label them, and then you blame them, and you blame the school, and you blame the community, and it's just not right at any level. And so we are lobbying the governor's office, we are lobbying the State Department of Education, and we are lobbying the legislators, both in person and in writing. And it's something right now that is at the forefront of my activities. And we are asking our legislators to stand behind this, because this concept of testing a child and then telling the world, this is this child based on this test score, or this is this school based on this test score, it's just not right, and it's not accurate. And what I've said to the state is, you're misleading the public. You're labeling schools, you're labeling children, you're labeling teachers, and it's just not accurate, and it's not right. And we're pushing that really hard. Now, does that strain relationships? Absolutely, because the harder we push, the angrier some people get at the state level. And there are special interest groups out there. There are groups out there that want to perpetuate the testing environment because, for a variety of reasons. But that's where I stand with it, and that's what we're trying to push. And again, the letters that have been written, and we're going down to the legislature in the next week and two to testify in person with these folks. Again.
Excellent, Don. Thank you for that. Next question comes from Jenny Padilla, and she asks, what school clubs or programs in your schools do you have that are catered to students of color and undocumented students to make sure they succeed and get the extra help that they need?
Well, I can't even begin to name all of the clubs that we have, but we have clubs across the board in every area, whether it's in the world languages, whether it's in the debate arenas, whether it's in the, I'm not at a loss because we don't have them. It's just that we have them across the board for all of our students, and many of them. I could certainly, if you send me an email, I can get them all listed and send them back to you by school, or at least by high school, middle school, elementary school. But we have tons and tons of clubs and programs in the co-curricular. And that's part of the reason why we now we're up to 81% of our students participating in these versus the 55, 56% that we used to have.
All right, Scott, you're next.
Sorry about that. The next question is, can you please share the expulsion rate by the following demographics: race, ethnicity, and gender? What does this look like across time? Has there been research of SRO's impact on Black, Indigenous, people of color students? And for that, is it important to recognize that the research has to be done by an independent party and not by the school district to really see if we're decreasing the institutional school to prison pipeline? Thank you.
Yeah, starting with the expulsions, I shared with you that graph, and so you see that across the board. When there is no disparity in expulsions, we expel significantly higher numbers of white students than we do minority students. But in the last 2 years, we haven't expelled any. And again, when you look at the last 5 years, it may be 4 in a year, and it's random. It's depending on an activity or a bad choice or a decision that people make, but you're not going to see anything along those lines with expulsions. And we track and monitor the same thing with law enforcement. I think the last 2 years we haven't arrested any students in our schools, and so that was brought up at the city council with the data. And the Colorado Department of Education tracks these things as well. I know the school resource officer conversation is taking place, and we talk about the school to prison pipeline. I don't believe that that's happening in St. Vrain, and I'm very confident of that, just by the mere fact that you see all of our students graduating, you see all of our students achieving at high levels, and what you see is that's across the board. and you don't see our students getting arrested. You know, our school resource officers do things like pass out food, they tutor students, they teach classes, they attend athletic events, they monitor hallways, they build relationships, they counsel our students. Very, very, very seldom will they actually engage in actual law enforcement work in a school. They're there as a preventative measure, but they've built lots of relationships with our students. And so we're not seeing that. And I know that I'm not blind to the fact that that happens across the country. And I'm not blind to the fact that there have been really serious incidents and killings that have happened at the hands of law enforcement in other places, you know, outside of St. Vrain and outside of Colorado, across the nation. So I'm very well aware of that. And I pay close attention to that. I meet with our SROs on a regular basis, their supervisors, the chief of police, and they understand clearly their role in our school system is to support our children. It's not to arrest them. It's not to give them summons. Well, again, once in a while that will happen. But again, the last 2 years, we haven't seen any of that in terms of arrests. The other thing that I think is important to realize around SROs is the state law requires certain behaviors to be turned over to the police. And that is required whether you have an SRO in the building or not. So if you don't have an SRO in the building, it doesn't mean that the police won't interact with the student. It means that you'll have to call the police to come to the school. They don't have a relationship with the school. They don't have a relationship with the student. And it's usually those instances that will result in something more serious because they haven't had the opportunity to build the relationships. The other thing we do a lot of is restorative justice. You know, we do everything in our power to keep kids out of that system. And so if kids and their families are willing to go through that process, which they almost always are, then we can avoid any of that activity. But if you look at the data, and it's a great question, I'm glad you asked it, because when you look at the data, you'll see that our SROs are serving in a way that's very consistent with our expectations. And I don't mince words with them, and they don't mince words with me, that your role in our schools is to support our children and make them feel comfortable and make them feel safe. The other thing about, and I know this is, we've been working remotely for a long time now. And so all of the school shooting conversations have kind of died down. But prior to that, you were seeing school shootings on a regular basis across the United States. And not only school shootings, but other very, very serious issues. The presence of an SRO who's working to support children, in my belief, not only helps them socially and emotionally, but it also prevents the potential, it reduces the potential for a significant catastrophic event in a school. And that, you talk about the things that keep a person awake at night, meaning me and our team, it's never wanting to have to wake up and say, why didn't we have an extra layer of defense? We get 800 to 900 safe to tell calls a year. And many of them come in at midnight or at 1 o'clock in the morning. And many of them are ambiguous. And they might say something like, such and such school is going to get shot up tomorrow. And we don't have anywhere to go except to our school resource officer to say, can we meet you guys at the school at 2 in the morning? And can we make sure that we walk the school, check everything out? Can we have your presence there? Can you be there to make sure everybody feels safe? And those are things we can't do if we don't have that close relationship with our SROs. Now, if I were looking at data and I was seeing that we were expelling kids disproportionately and kids were disproportionately getting arrested or given summons, then we would take a look at that. And we would either stop it or we would stop the program. But that's not happening in St. Vrain. It's just not happening. You can say it's happening, but it's not. And so the benefit for safety, physically, socially, and emotionally is absolutely critical. And it's what I believe. And I am very closely connected and involved with this program, as is all of our team members and our Board of Education. It's not something that we just assume is going well. I spend a lot of time in the schools. I observe, talk to people, and I'd be more than happy to visit with anybody and lay out the data, the Longmont Police Department, we have SROs across the district in other areas other than Longmont, but Longmont laid out all of their data. I want to say it was Tuesday night. I was there. It was a Zoom meeting. It was a virtual meeting. And so I don't know if people had an opportunity to look at that. But that's where we are with the SRO program. So thank you for that question. I'm glad. I was hoping that it would come up.
Thank you, Don. Okay, next question comes from Laura Soto. And she says, hi, Don. I'd like to ask about the current recruitment. Oh, there we go. Sorry, my screen moved. Hi, Don. I'd like to ask about the current recruitment and hiring practices for teachers and counselors to intently recruit professionals who are Black, Indigenous, people of color. As you know, I am not only an involved parent, but I have also served as a professional interpreter for various district parents meetings. I remember hearing at one of those meetings about 4 years ago that the district had no real plan or practice to intentionally hire BIPOC teachers and counselors when a Latinx parent asked about getting professionals that better represent the diversity of student population. Have hiring practices changed since then to be more intentional to diversify the teachers and counselors that serve our families?
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, I'm not sure in the context of what was said to you, and hi to you as well. Thank you for starting out by saying hi. But I'm not sure the context of that conversation, but what I can tell you is it's not only with our teachers and counselors, it's also with our leadership. You know, we have hired a number of principals, a number of central office staff, a number of leaders in our system. And that in and of itself causes more awareness around this issue. The other thing that we've been doing is working with our colleges and universities. You know, we submitted some legislation a couple of years back to try to get a teaching certificate that could come out of a community college in 2 years versus 4 years, because what we're seeing with the teaching profession across the board is a massive shortage, not just with our minority folks, but also with all teachers just across the board. And so part of what they report to us is that 4 years worth of debt takes a lifetime with a teacher's salary to get out of the hole. And so you're seeing a lot fewer people go into the teaching programs in our colleges, which drops the availability of teachers everywhere. And so we've been working with them to try to create opportunities for people to do that. We also started our own P-Teach program in partnership with UCD. And this is a program that is designed to cultivate teachers, first generation teachers, and they start in high school and they work in partnership with UCD, the University of Colorado, Denver, and they earn their teaching degree, and then they come back and then they teach in St. Vrain. And the first year, our graduating cohort was 2, and then it went up to like 15, and now it's up in the 30s every year. And so we're about 30 students, primarily first generation students, minority students, that we are actually cultivating at the high school level to help the colleges, because the colleges were dropping way off in terms of the number. And so we're building our own pool of teachers, and they teach in St. Vrain. So there's a lot that we're doing around that. And also we know by hiring more of our leaders, our principals, our assistant superintendents across the board, and then we go out and we recruit. I asked our HR department to expand its recruitment efforts across the entire United States, so that we've increased significantly our recruiting fairs. Now with COVID, some of that in-person stuff has slowed down, but we're still doing it virtually. And so the answer to your question is yes, it's a high priority for us. And it's not just a high priority in our words. Again, we've built the P-Teach program that you can look at, the P-Tech program that's graduating our students with a 2-year associate degree, our work with the colleges and the universities, our expansion of our recruitment efforts, and our increase in the hiring of our leaders who are the ones doing the hiring. So all of those things are starting to yield some pretty positive results.
All right, thanks, Don. And I'll just make one announcement before we go on to our next question. I see that there's some comments in the chat section as well. Just be sure that if you have a specific question that you want to ask of Don, put that in the Q&A section. Just that way we can make sure that we get your question answered. It's fine to chat as well, but if you have a specific question you want to see answered, drop that in the Q&A section. Don, this one's a little bit similar to the one before. I would like to hear your comments on how to improve equity, especially meaningful access to language services for Spanish-speaking parents. A couple months ago, we, as in monolingual Spanish-speaking parents, had a meeting with the Director of Nutrition Services and asked specifically for an interpreter. She brought a bilingual coworker, not a trained interpreter, who practically humiliated us and didn't deliver our message accurately. Besides offering community liaisons, there should be a team of professional interpreters.
Yeah, no, I agree. And we do have interpreters. We don't have as many as we would like, but we do have interpreters that we use them for meetings like that. First of all, I want to apologize to you for the experience that you had. I'm sorry to hear that. And secondly, we have, an executive director, Olga Cordero, and Johnny Terrell, who's an executive director who can both, access through student services at any time interpreters. And so not only for meetings, but also for the letters that I send out, we have them all interpreted. And also on our website, you can get information on our website interpreted. The other thing that I think is important to know is the connections that we're developing with our parents. We have a strong partnership with El Paso, with Tere Garcia, and she and I work together closely. And we provide about $20,000 a year for that program to help parents come in and navigate systems and ask questions and learn about our district. And again, it's not perfect. And if that experience happened where you're concerned, again, I apologize for it, but whenever there's a meeting where that's necessary, we can provide interpreters. And I will pass that on to Olga and Johnny to continue to hire as many as we need to make sure that service is in place. So thank you for that.
Excellent, Don. Thank you. The next question comes from Trista, and Trista asks, why doesn't the St. Vrain Valley School District have bilingual schools / education if there is such a huge Latino population? And how is the biliteracy certification different than a bilingual education?
Yeah, we do have bilingual education. We have, I think, 5 of our elementary schools, and we use an early exit model. But so we do have bilingual education, and we also have we used to have 6, and then we consolidated down to 5. So that's there. And the second part of that question, say it one more time, please, Ricardo.
Yes, how is the biliteracy certification different than a bilingual education?
Yeah, there are certain courses that you have to take. And so it's not just language. There are certain courses that you take for that biliteracy. And if you go onto our website, you can see exactly the requirements for a seal of biliteracy. And it was developed by a committee to take a look at. And again, all of those things are outlined very clearly on our website. That shows which courses you would have to take, that include world language and advanced courses and things like that. So I don't have them memorized off the top of my tongue, but I know that Olga and her team and our team, me being part of that, developed that seal of biliteracy.
All right, thanks, Don. And the next question is, how many students have been lost during COVID-19, and what were the demographics of these students?
Yeah, lost is an interesting term because we were supposed to grow by somewhere around 300, 400 students, and we didn't. And so we ended up with about 600 plus losing them. So the total amount was somewhere around 1,000 that we were supposed to have that we didn't have. Some because we didn't see the growth, and some because we lost kids that we already had. And when I say lost, in many cases, we know, notified us they were moving or they were leaving because of, economics. Parents lost their jobs, families had to move out of state and things like that. And it was primarily, well, when I say primarily, I don't have the exact numbers, but the majority of students that we were anticipating coming in, we lost were among our Hispanic students. It wasn't just with COVID that trend started. That trend started, we saw probably, I want to say 3 years ago, something that hadn't happened in the past is we lost a number of Hispanic students that did not enroll in August when we were anticipating they would enroll. And as we were looking into it, we realized that they had moved. And we had some thoughts around what was going on. There were a lot of things happening in our environment. I mean, not just in St. Vrain, but I'm talking about across the country. And we were starting to see a decrease in number of our Hispanic students. That has leveled off now, and we're starting to see it come back, which is a good thing. But we're hovering around that area, around 30% right now of our student population represents our Hispanic students. But to your question, the kids we lost specific to COVID, the majority of those students were Hispanic students.
Okay, Don, thank you very much. Next question comes from Yaira Okendo, and she asks, how are the IEP and other similar support being implemented now that kids are studying from home? Also, how the district is managing the cognitive testing requests considering the delay COVID may have created.
Yeah, it's interesting because we had our, one of the exceptions to the rules, when we had our hybrid and kids working from home, is that our students with special needs continued to have the option to come in 4 days a week for exactly that reason, because it would be hard to provide some of the services from home. So we offered that opportunity. We had a lot of our special needs students would come in on IEPs, and they would actually come in 4 days a week and get their services in person. And then some of the work was done virtually as well, but the majority of families selected that in-person option. So that's kind of how we navigated that. And now we're going back to 4 days a week for all students. And then next fall, we'll go back to 5 days a week. And we also offered after-school support, academic support for kids. And then we are going to extend the school year through the month of June for all kids K through 8 who want to enroll and come in 4 days a week and work on academics and work on support. So that whole month will be there. And then we're going to start them 2 weeks earlier in August. So all of those things will be designed to help. In this case, you're asking about our students on IEPs, so these students and other students as well. So, but that's how we were able to navigate. There was a different criteria there in order to be in compliance, and recognizing the virtual approach would be very difficult.
So let me just ask, what is IEP?
It's an individualized education plan, and it comes under IDEA, which is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And it's an individual plan that recognizes the challenge that a student might have, and then creates that individual education plan and all of the support mechanisms for that student to be as successful as they can be.
Excellent, thank you.
Sure.
Okay, and the next question, do you have any mental health resources or programs for your students?
We do. We have a lot internally, and then we also contract out with people in the community. And we have a large number. We have school psychologists, we have social workers, we have counselors. We actually, one of the few districts that have counselors from kindergarten all the way up through 12th grade. We have interventionists and a whole host of individuals that are designed to support our students with the mental health challenge. That's a great question, because that's another thing. I mean, it's always a challenge, but COVID has really exacerbated that, and we've seen more of our students struggling with mental health, with anxiety, with depression, with some of the struggles that that come regularly just because life is hard. But with COVID, it's kind of intensified at a level that we've actually had to add more staff to address that. And I don't know if you have children in our district, you probably received the letters that I had been sending out that said we were offering counseling support Monday through Friday for all of our children. Even when they're at home, you could call and schedule appointments. And we had hundreds of families take advantage of that because it's been really hard. And again, mental health has been a challenge long before COVID, but with COVID, it's made it even worse.
Okay, thank you, Don. Next question comes from Lindsay Terranova, and she asks, what is the district doing to ensure whole child achievement and success, ensuring that we are producing graduates that aren't just academically prepared, but are socially and emotionally prepared and ready for a world full of different people who are different? Do you measure or have any goals surrounding emotional health and well-being?
Yeah, we do. You know, when we look at things that I shared with you on the slideshow, you know, at what rate are students engaging in behaviors that cause them to get suspended or get expelled? We look at attendance rates to see our kids coming in. We look at counseling rates and how well students are doing there. When I was talking about, you know, those the well-rounded nature of an education that you're going to get in St. Vrain, you know, you will have more opportunities for music programs, whether it's choir, band, orchestra, drumline. You will have more opportunities for athletics, boys and girls sports across the board. We're one of the only districts that haven't yet eliminated middle school sports. We have the now it's on a hold right now with at middle school because of COVID, that it'll come back in the fall. But we have clubs and we have intramurals as well. And then all of the extracurricular activities like debate and theater and drama and leadership, all of these things are designed to push our kids out into the world with a strong competitive advantage. It is so much more than academics. And Lindsay, thank you for the question, because that's what I was referring to earlier when I was saying that standardized tests, while they can be one measure that we can take a look at, there are so many other ways in which students need to learn and grow and opportunities to be involved with that extend well beyond academics. You know, I'll give you an example. When I was in high school, when I was in middle school and high school, my love was wrestling. That's what I did 24/7. And I went to school to make sure that I could stay eligible for wrestling. And I went to college on a wrestling scholarship. And I will tell people, regardless of all of the educational experiences that I've had from an academic perspective, what I learned from coaches and teachers and my parents and colleagues and my friends with whom I wrestled, and all of the things around hard work and overcoming adversity and getting along with other people and really leadership and all of those things, you know, you can't learn all of that in a classroom. And that's why St. Vrain, when we had all those major budget cuts back in 2008 with the recession, you were seeing districts across the board cutting music and art and all of those things. We didn't cut any of those. In fact, we doubled down on them because those are the reasons where a lot of kids are successful. And if you look at the correlation, that's what colleges and universities, and that's what people in the workforce are looking for. Well-rounded, emotionally healthy. And I'm not diminishing academics. They're important too. But it's the whole package that you've got to provide for your children. And that's what we try to do in St. Vrain.
And the next question is, how do you assess best product and how do you align that with your current equitable practices?
When you say best product, I'm not sure what you mean by that.
Back to the other question about buying.
Let's see here. If the person, this was an anonymous attendee, if you want to explain what you mean by best product, why don't you go ahead and put that in either the chat section or the Q&A, and we'll come back to your question. Why don't we just go on to the next one then, and then we'll see if we can come back to that one. Can you elaborate on how the school district is taking those extra steps to provide equitable access through these accelerated programs to our most vulnerable children?
Yeah, well, you got to start from the beginning. You know, if you don't start kids in high quality preschool programs and high quality full day kindergarten programs, and you don't have them in high quality K-5, and you're not preparing them with reading and math and writing and all of those essential skills early on, and you're not engaging them in all of the co-curricular activities that we talked about. And when you get into the middle school, are you offering those classes to all of your children in every one of your middle schools? Or are you just offering those classes to certain middle schools? When you look at technology, are you giving the technology to every child, regardless of their socioeconomics? Because if you're not, then you're not, by design, giving every kid equal opportunity. When you have 8 classes that you can take in high school, and you look at the choices that you have, all of these things in this pre-K through 14 system, when you offer a 2-year associate degree program at no cost to the students, and the students in that program are the students that you're referring to, that's another by design way of getting kids to take those types of classes. When you build partnerships with your community college, when you set up advanced manufacturing programs with welding and with optics and electronics and artificial intelligence and virtual reality and all of these things, that's how you do it. When you make sure that every school, every one of your 60 plus schools in the district is providing a great education with all of the resources, that's how you make sure that you're doing that. And our counselors are very, very skilled at counseling students and sharing with them the opportunities that they have. So it's, when we talk about it, when we talk about each child, we mean each child. And our system by design does it. It's not something that we decide to wake up one day and say, well, let's have a campaign. Let's do a campaign and see how many students we can recruit. No, it's bringing them in on Saturdays. It's providing transportation. You know, when we say that we're going to provide school throughout the month of June, that's unheard of for school districts, and it doesn't come without a massive cost. And not only are we providing them with the classes, but we're providing them with the transportation and the food and the great teachers. And those are the ways that you provide and you prepare kids to do that. You can't just wait till they get to be in the 9th grade and say, okay, we're going to try to get as many kids as we can into this advanced course. You have to start. That's why we call it excellence by design, from preschool all the way to 14. And that's what it takes. It takes a system by design to cultivate this and provide opportunities for every child. You know, I'll tell you, I don't remember how many years ago it was, but if you were to do a facilities assessment in St. Vrain, you would find schools in certain neighborhoods that were run down, that, you know, the quality of the facility in and of itself did not represent equity. And so when we passed that bond in 2008, one of the things that we said we were going to do was we're going to renovate all of our schools so that schools that were older than the new schools came up to par, and they were a place that we would all be happy to send our kids. When we won $20 million between Race to the Top, which was $16.8 million, and then the I3, which is Invest in Innovation for 3.6, about $20 million in grant money. We put all of that money into the Skyline feeder system to ensure that we could build STEM programming out in Skyline. That's why Skyline has one of the premier STEM programs in visual and performing arts, among other things. And we decided it's not okay anymore to have certain schools that have access to all of these high quality learning experiences and others that don't. And those are the ways that we do. When you look at the extra money we put into our Title I schools, we put in more money to our Title I schools, which are represented by a lower socioeconomic, to make sure that they have the opportunities and the access to these things. And it's not left up to how much money can a PTO in a community raise. When we say we're going to do work with technology, and we say that every single child is going to get an iPad, and it's not going to cost that child anything, so you don't have to worry about it. And then, well, I don't have internet access. Well, we'll pay for your internet access too. And so we put out hotspots across the entire system. And we've been working with companies now, not only for a hotspot, but to provide internet access for every single one of our children, whether they can afford it or not. That's how you do it. And to just coin a phrase, you have to put your money where your mouth is. And if you look at what we're doing, we are doing exactly that. So when we say equity, we mean equity. And it costs a lot of money to do that, but it's that important. It's probably, if not the most important, it's certainly one of the most important things we do. Every child.
Thanks, Don. Let's see, we are at 4:56. We have about a half an hour left and about 6 questions. So I think we'll be able to cover everybody's questions today.
Great.
All right, so Don, here's the next question, written by Anonymous. So there is...
I'll say something about that. There's no need to be anonymous. You don't have to be anonymous. The community, you should feel welcome to just ask your question. And so really, don't worry about that for whatever reason. Just, if you want to stay anonymous, that's fine. But you don't have to do that. So.
Okay, so I think I was just reminded we're going to 5 p.m. Is that correct? So that gives us 4 minutes. So let me ask you this last question so we can finish out. Let's see. There is scientific data on generational trauma and the impact it has in specific communities, Black, Indigenous, and Latinx. In this aspect, I would like to address the generational trauma of SROs at school. When a student who personally or family has an interaction with police or has been a victim of police brutality, that will impact their performance regardless of if the SRO is trained to be not violent with our youth. Can we have this conversation of the impact of having police presence with our students of color who have been historically impacted by police brutality? Data is not enough to make a decision. We need to look at history and we need to listen to the voices of our communities who have been significantly impacted by police brutality and police surveillance. Thank you.
Yeah, and one thing I do want to assure you of is we listen. And the fact that we might not come to the same conclusion does not mean we're not listening. It just simply means we have to talk more and to communicate more. I know that our children are going to experience and encounter police officers in society. That's part of society. And police officers will come into our schools at times, even if we don't have SROs. And they will encounter SROs or police officers at certain sporting events with the school district, because we have to have for evening events and things like that, whether we have school resource officers or not. I have to tell you that if there's a way to break through that trauma, and I believe that trauma is real, and I acknowledge it, and I can't ever sit here and tell you that, yeah, I get it, I understand, because if you don't go through something personally, you can never fully understand the trauma. But I hear you, and I hear what you're saying. But if there's ever a way to break through that, it's to bring people together. It's to bring them together to talk, to understand that all police officers, in fact, the majority of them, are not bad people. And if you've had an experience with one here and one here and in a community, which I believe that that's true, it doesn't mean that there aren't really good people who are police officers as well. And our children, and I've seen it with not only middle and high school, we don't have them at the elementary school levels, but I've seen it with all kids, the relationships that they build. And kids come to me, kids of different ethnicities, and say, please don't get rid of our SROs. And parents, we held meetings 2 years ago in our community. There was a time when, I don't remember the name of the incident, but there was another school shooting. and the law enforcement came to us and they suggested that they would like to put a long gun in our high schools and schools in a locked safe. And so we went out to our community, and because we wanted to ask them that we didn't know how our community would feel about that. So we held a series of meetings, a lot of them. I think they're like 15, 2 years in a row. And overwhelmingly, our community was saying, we like the law enforcement presence, and we like the way in which our law enforcement interacts with our students. Now, I've had some people say to me, well, that's because the people that are giving you that feedback have never experienced the trauma. And I believe that that's true. And so we have to address that. And so to your question, can we have the conversation? Yes, and we are having the conversation. We're having the conversation around training. We're having the conversation around protocol. We're having the conversation around how to interact with our students. So we can have that conversation, but I want you to know that just because there are differences of opinion, it doesn't mean that people aren't listening. You can listen, and it's a two-way street. You know, we all have to listen. We can't come to the table with our preconceived notions. I can't do that, and you can't do that. And just as you're asking me to listen, I would ask you to listen, and I would take anybody on a tour through our schools and meet our SROs. And you can see the interactions they have with our children. And I would be the first one to invite them to leave if I ever became aware of a student or a group of students who are being mistreated. Now, what I ask people to do is, instead of saying, I heard, or someone told me, if you've had an experience with an SRO that has caused your child to feel uncomfortable, I want to know about it. The principal wants to know about it, and we will address it immediately. But we have to be able to communicate with each other, and we have to be able to respect each other's perspective. And I could never sit here in all honesty and say that I have walked in a person's shoes, I understand it fully. There's no way I could do that. But I'm always here to listen. So it's not a matter of not listening. It's not a matter of not being available. It's just we got to work through these issues. We've got to talk through them. And yes, those conversations are always available, but I would ask that they don't come to the table with, we want to get rid of our SROs. I would ask that you come to the table and be willing to listen as well.
Thank you, Don. We are at time, and this was really great. We shared a lot of great information, and there was a lot of great questions. I think Don will agree with me and the rest of the team here that the conversation's not over. We want to see all of your questions answered. I think we have about 7 or more still in the chat section. So what we'll do is Karen, on our chamber staff, as well as school district staff, we will make a copy of these questions, and we will send them to Don so that he can answer them. And then
Scott, yeah, I want, before you go, I want to thank you for this opportunity, and I'm more than willing to come back and do this as many times as you like, because, you know, there's no way I'm going to always answer a question the way somebody wants me to answer it, but I'm always going to answer it truthfully, and I'm always going to tell you what I believe, and then I'm always going to leave the door open for further conversation. And, you know, one thing I can promise you is, even though we might not agree, more often than not we agree, but even if we don't agree, that's okay. That's part of how we get better and stronger as a community. As long as we're willing to keep the relationship alive, and we're willing to keep the conversations going, and we're willing to try to see things from somebody else's perspective, my only motivation is to protect the well-being of our children and our teachers and our staff and our community. That's it. We may differ on how we get there, but that is, and I know we agree on that we all want what's best for our children. And so we can do that together, even if we have to, you know, have some hard conversations. So if you want to invite me back anytime, I'd be more than happy to join you. And hopefully we can start doing this in person.
we would love to do this in person at some point. Yes, hopefully sooner than later. And Don, you're always welcome to come back. And maybe what we'll do is I'll work with Ricardo and Matt Wiggins on your staff, and we will just arrange another time to do this. Because again, I hate to close things off in mid conversation. It feels like with questions unanswered, but we will get those questions answered. And I agree, Don, the best way to do that is to keep the relationship channels open. And we just appreciate you doing that for us here at both of our chambers and for the rest of our community. I also want to thank the attendees for attending today. Thank you for your interest in the school district. Thank you for your interest in our students and in our future. Also a special thanks to Marta, who's been doing our translation this whole time. I'm sure she's tired.
Thanks,
but
Marta.
thank you very much for your work behind the scenes and doing that for us. I also want to mention that if you have further questions, so we'll take care of the ones that are here in the chat section, but if you have further questions, you can forward those to Matt Wiggins or Olga Cadero at the school district. And then I also want to thank Ricardo and everyone at the Latino Chamber for your partnership with us in putting this event on, and thank you for all your work. So
Ricardo, thank you as well.
Well,
Scott,
thank you,
you.
Don. Thank you, Scott. It's been great. Let's do it again. Like you mentioned, there are questions, and there'll be more, I'm sure. So whenever we have the opportunity, we'll do it again.
Sounds good.
all right, thank you all and have a good evening.